In her introduction to The Lincolns, a scrapbook look at Abraham and Mary, Candace Fleming talks about the daunting task of bringing her subject to life for readers. After all, she says, one of the best ways to get to know people is to pore over photographs of their children, read snippets of their love letters, bake, if you want to, their favorite cake, or even peek at the contents of their pockets. From the book's very first page, we're given this unique opportunity through quotes by and about the Lincolns, clear and straightforward text, and image after image of astonishing primary source reproductions, photographs, drawings, written correspondence, poems, newspaper articles, and even that white cake recipe of Mary's, called by her husband the best I've ever eaten. By providing readers with such well-organized, varied, and in-depth information, and some gossip too, Fleming shows how history is pieced together and how historical figures are constructed and deconstructed. I'm delighted to present the 2009 Boston Globe Hornbook Award for Nonfiction to The Lincolns, a Scrapbook Look at Abraham and Mary, published by Schwartz and Wade, an imprint of Random House Books, edited by Anne Schwartz, written by Candace Fleming.
Oh, now I can see my text and I can't see you. Standing here tonight reminds me that life truly is a lovely circle. Long ago, I enrolled in a children's literature class. I wasn't an education major, but I needed an elective, and children's lit sounded like an easy A. I know better now. On our first day in class, Dr. Woods handed out a long, single-spaced reading list devoted to what she confidently called the cream of the crop in children's literature. While she spoke, I skimmed her list, and I knew that I had work to do. The first section listed all the books that had won Newbery. The second section, all Caldecott-winning books. And the third listed books that had won the Boston Globe Hornbook Award. Now, I'd been a reader. And while I was familiar with Caldecott and Newbery, the Boston Globe Hornbook picks surprised me, especially the handful, and way back then there were about 7, the handful of nonfiction books that were placed in a category all their own. I'd somehow overlooked those types of books, books that told true stories about the world. I was just 20 years old at the time, with no writing aspirations of my own. And yet, on that list, I discovered books created by people who somehow knew what interested me and inspired me before I knew it myself. Those books delighted me. They gave me stories to cherish. They incited me to write. And so it really is a glorious, unexpected surprise that I'm standing here tonight. It is indeed a lovely circle. A circle expanded by the fact that I'm here because of one Mr. Lincoln. Since childhood, Abraham Lincoln's been puttering around in my life, tall and sallow, bright-eyed but sorrowful, appearing here and there in likely and unlikely places, stirring things up, making himself undeniable to me. Before you think I'm crazy, allow me to explain my relationship with him, which runs pretty deep. I grew up in a small town in central Illinois, the same town in which Tom and Sarah Lincoln moved or settled when they moved to Illinois back in 1830. The Lincolns built a cabin there, a cabin that some 140 years later, my friends and I used as a playhouse. Pedaling our bicycles 3 miles out of town, we would climb the rickety ladder to the loft, and we would play in that moldy, mildewy root cellar. When bored, we would hop onto our bikes and we'd pedal over to Shiloh Cemetery, not more than really a dozen graves stuck in the middle of a cornfield, to rest against the cool gray slab of marble marking Tom and Sarah's final resting place. Almost every Friday night, I spent the night at my friend Emily's house. Hers was a drafty old Victorian that legend said Lincoln had slept in the 1850s. I could picture him, climbing those front stairs and removing his improbable front stovepipe pipe to greet the lady of the house before crossing the threshold into the cool parlor. I could picture him in Emily's room, too, with his too short nightgown and his bare, bony toes. And I longed to talk to him. More than once, we pulled out the Ouija board in an attempt to conjure him up. Despite our pleas to the afterlife, he never came. But it didn't matter. We could hear him anyway. Lincoln's voice seemed to echo from every street corner, every riverbank, every bridge. He was always present. He was always there. You see, Central Illinois, it really is like no place else on earth. When I moved to Chicago, Lincoln followed me. How could he not? He was in my bones. He was part of me. I quoted him. I dragged my sons to Civil War sites and museums and stuffed their impressionable young minds full of Lincoln stories. I even suggested that my oldest son, Scott, dress up for Lincoln as Halloween when he was in second grade. Incredibly, he looked exactly like our 16th president, only shorter. When I began writing, I inevitably chose Lincoln as my subject. My first ever published piece was a magazine article titled "Abraham Lincoln is Not Buried Here," which appeared in American History Illustrated. I was paid very little for that article. Pennies, really. You know, the kind with Lincoln's profile. If you visit Lincoln's Kentucky birthplace, you'll find a replica of his simple, rough-hewn cabin encased in a classical temple, a facsimile of something genuine, enshrined in a marble myth. This is the Lincoln most of us have grown up with. For generations, we've been taught to be just like him. Hardworking, honest, principled, self-sacrificing, stalwart, kind to animals and children, a champion of unpopular causes. Blah. A sermon. After all, who wants to face a shining, flawless hero as if such a thing ever existed? Who wants their history to be antiseptic, burnished, a moral lesson that has little to do with their own lives? Too often, I think that's how history comes to us. It's a list of facts, a catalog of dates, or in the case of Lincoln, a flawed, complex man polished and enshrined in a marble temple. The way history is often told, it's easy to believe that no one ever told a lie, or failed a test, or swore in polite company. Young readers ask, wasn't there anybody in history like me?